I've carried this story like a secret disease, quiet, spreading, shaping every part of my life while no one saw a thing. For 70 years, I smiled through birthday cakes and baby showers, passed the peace on Sunday mornings, all while a part of me was still lying in that bedroom, with the door cracked open and the monster stepping inside. My name is Louise. I'm 82 years old, and before I leave this world, I need you to know the truth. When I was 8, my uncle started abusing me, and the day my aunt caught him, she looked me dead in the eye and called me the Jezebel. I've carried this story for 70 years, like a brick in my chest, heavy, unmoving, pressed so deep into me, I sometimes forgot it was there, until it reminded me in quiet ways. A shortness of breath when someone shut a door too hard, a tightening in my shoulders when someone called my name in just the wrong tone. I've smiled through church picnics and birthday cakes, baptisms and graduations, all with that brick humming just beneath my ribs. I never told my children. I never told my husband, not because I didn't trust them, but because I had learned too early that truth doesn't always set you free. Sometimes it puts you out in the cold. I learned to keep it tucked away, safe and undisturbed. Life went on, and I let it. There was laundry to fold, babies to rock, dinners to cook, funerals to attend. There was love in my life, and laughter too, but that brick never left. It just made a home inside me. Now my hands tremble more than they used to. My doctor has started using words like decline and fragile, as if I hadn't noticed my own body growing lighter and louder all at once. I've started talking to people who aren't in the room. My mother, my brother, my best friend Dolores, who passed 15 years ago. And I find myself thinking more and more about what I'll leave behind. What stories will linger after I'm gone. I don't want to leave this world with a lie lodged in my throat. I don't want to meet my God with silence still clenched in my fists. I've prayed on this. I've waited. And now I know. This story can't stay buried. Even if no one remembers the names, even if the people who hurt me are already in the ground, I need to say it. Because this story, it belongs to me. And I'm not taking it with me. I was 8 years old the year Uncle Harvey came to live with us. My daddy said he'd fallen on hard times, though I never really understood what that meant. I just remember how Mama pursed her lips and said, "Family don't let family sleep on the street." And that was that. A week later, his big brown suitcase was sitting in our front hall, and his boots were by the door. He smelled like cigarettes and aftershave, and his laugh filled up a room like smoke, thick and hard to escape. At first, I liked him. He brought me candy and called me Lulu, which nobody else did. He said I had the prettiest braids he'd ever seen and that I was growing into a fine young lady. I didn't know what that meant either, not then. I just liked the way he winked when he said it, like we had a little secret. He made jokes that made Daddy laugh and told stories that made Mama roll her eyes but smile anyway. It felt special, having a grown-up who paid attention to me. He moved into the back bedroom, the one that used to be for storage, and Mama made up the bed with fresh sheets. We ate dinner at the table like we always did, only now there was another chair, another voice. At night, I could hear him moving around after everyone else had gone to sleep. The floorboards creaked under his feet, and sometimes the toilet would flush 2, 3 times. I thought maybe he had a weak bladder or bad dreams. I didn't ask. Children were meant to be quiet and polite. The first time he came into my room, it was just to say goodnight. That's what he said anyway. "Just checking on my girl," he whispered, pulling the covers up over my shoulders like he was doing me a kindness. His hand lingered a little too long, brushing my hair back, touching the curve of my cheek. I remember lying there stiff as a board, my eyes shut tight. I didn't know what to call the feeling, but it made my stomach twist. The next time he sat on the edge of my bed, told me I was beautiful, touched my arm, my knee, said he was just being affectionate, that a girl like me ought to feel loved. I didn't say anything. I didn't move. I just pretended to be asleep. That became my ritual. Close my eyes, hold my breath, pray he'd leave. And when he didn't, I learned how to float outside my own body. It was the only way I knew to survive. The grown-ups didn't see it, or maybe they didn't want to. He was helpful around the house, always polite in public. He carved the turkey at Thanksgiving and held the church door open for old ladies. I was just a little girl with a quiet voice and tired eyes. Nobody thought to ask why I'd stopped laughing at his jokes, why I flinched when he walked by. I stopped being a child that year. Not all at once, but in quiet pieces. I started sleeping with the lamp on, even though Daddy said it wasted electricity. I'd lie in bed listening to the night sounds of the house, the refrigerator humming, the dog shifting in his sleep, and sometimes the soft creak of a footstep outside my door. I learned to breathe evenly, to pretend sleep so well that even I started to believe it. Every night was a test. Would he come in or wouldn't he? And every morning, I'd wake up just a little further away from myself. I stopped sitting on his lap. That had been something normal once, something every niece did. But now, the thought made my skin crawl. He noticed the change. He'd tease me in front of everyone, say I was getting too grown to hug her uncle. Mama would laugh and tell me not to be so moody. "You've got to be sweet, baby," she said. "Don't make your uncle feel unwanted." So I learned to smile with my mouth and not my eyes, to hug him just long enough, to stay quiet when his hand lingered too low on my back. At school, I was a good student, polite, obedient, never loud. I colored inside the lines and kept my pencils sharpened. My teacher once wrote on my report card, "Louise is very mature for her age." If only she knew how fast I'd had to grow up. I envied the other girls, the ones who still giggled and ran wild on the playground. I'd watch them from the sidelines, trying to remember what it felt like to be free like that. Sunday was the hardest day. Church in the morning, then dinner with our family in the afternoon. Uncle Harvey would sit next to me on the pew, his hand resting just a little too close to mine. During hymns, he'd lean in and whisper compliments, always soft enough that no one else could hear. "You look lovely in that dress." "You're my favorite girl." I started wearing dull clothes, flat shoes. I tried to disappear in plain sight. No one seemed to notice I was fading. Mama was busy with the house, with Daddy, with church work. Daddy worked long hours and came home tired. I don't blame them for missing the signs. I'd made myself small on purpose. But sometimes, late at night when Mama tucked me in, I'd wonder what she saw when she looked at me. Did she notice the bags under my eyes? The way I flinched when she reached too fast? Or did she only see what she wanted to see? Her quiet, well-behaved daughter. I became a shadow in my own home. Not loud enough to cause concern. Not broken enough to be saved. Just quiet. Just obedient. Just scared. I tried to tell Mama once. I don't even remember what pushed me to do it. Maybe it was a particularly bad night. Maybe it was the way Uncle Harvey smiled at me over breakfast like nothing had happened. Or maybe I just wanted to see if anyone would choose me. I remember standing in the kitchen while she shelled peas, the afternoon light slanting through the window, painting her face in gold. My hands were shaking and my voice barely made it past my lips. Uncle Harvey touched me in a bad way. She didn't miss a beat. The back of her hand met the side of my head so fast I saw stars. The bowl of peas tipped, green scattering across the floor. I stumbled, not from the pain, but from the shock. Mama wasn't a hitter. She believed in spanking, sure, but this was different. This was sharp and sudden and personal. "Don't you ever say something like that about family," she hissed, her voice low and furious. "You hear me?" I nodded, hand to my cheek, not because I understood, but because I couldn't bear another strike. The room felt too still after that, the air thick. She turned back to the peas as if nothing had happened, and I knelt to pick them up, one by one, trying not to cry. I never spoke of it again. After that day, I knew the rules. Whatever happened in the dark stayed there. Whatever Uncle Harvey did wasn't something the world was allowed to know. And whatever pain I carried, I'd carry alone. I looked at Mama differently after that. Not with hate, not even with anger, just distance, like I had learned something final about the shape of her love. She still brushed my hair before church and packed my lunch for school. She still kissed my forehead at bedtime. But something between us had broken, something quiet and sacred. I stopped hoping she'd notice the signs, stopped wishing she'd protect me. She had chosen her version of truth, and it did not include my voice. That slap did more than silence me. It taught me that in our house, family came before facts, and appearances came before protection. I wasn't the victim. I was the threat, the one who could ruin everything if I spoke too loudly. So I stopped speaking. I became what they needed me to be, sweet, silent, and invisible. Every Sunday after church, my aunt would come by for dinner. She was Uncle Harvey's wife, though she never stayed the night. She lived 2 towns over and said she didn't like sleeping in other people's houses. I remember thinking it strange even back then, how she came to see him, but never really stayed with him. Still, every Sunday she arrived in her pressed dresses and wide-brimmed hats, perfume trailing behind her like a second presence. She carried herself like a woman who belonged somewhere important. She always brought something sweet, pecan pie, lemon pound cake, a tin of homemade fudge, and she kissed me on the cheek as she walked in, saying, "There's my little lady. Why so glum, sugar? Don't tell me you're still in one of your moods." I never knew how to answer. I'd force a smile and mumble something polite. She'd pinch my cheek just hard enough to leave a mark and whisper, "You've got to stop being moody, baby. Don't make your uncle think you don't love him." That phrase stuck with me. Don't make your uncle think you don't love him. It twisted inside me, poisoned every look, every silence. I wondered if she knew, if she saw the way I stiffened when he walked into the room, if she noticed how I never sat next to him anymore, how I flinched when he brushed past me. She was a sharp woman. Nothing escaped her when it came to manners or appearances. And yet, when it came to me, she only ever saw what she wanted to see. They'd sit around the dining room table after dinner, laughing about church gossip or trading old stories. I'd help Mama clear the plates, pretending I wasn't listening. But I always was. Uncle Harvey's laugh boomed through the house, too loud, too familiar. My aunt's voice followed like a song, light and teasing. And there I was, invisible again, scraping plates into the sink, my stomach turning with every chuckle. Once I caught her watching me from across the room. I'd spilled some sweet tea on the tablecloth and was scrubbing it hard, too hard, and when I looked up, she was staring, not curious, not angry, just watching, like she was trying to decide something. But then she blinked, smiled, and called out, "You missed a spot, Lulu." And just like that, the moment passed. I wondered if part of her already knew, if she'd seen glimpses of the truth and chosen to look away. After all, admitting it would have shattered her world too. Better to scold a moody child than confront the rot in your own marriage. Better to preserve the illusion than let the truth stain the good silver and clean linens. So I kept smiling, kept calling her ma'am, kept eating the pies she brought even when the sweetness made me sick. Sunday after Sunday, I played my part, and every time she looked at me with those painted eyes and perfect lipstick, I felt myself sink a little deeper into Valence. By the time I turned 16, I had become an expert at survival. Not just the kind that keeps your body alive, but the quiet kind. The kind that keeps you small enough to go unnoticed. I knew every creak in the floorboards and which steps to skip if I wanted to move silently through the house. I had a chair wedged under my door each night, angled just right to buy me a few precious seconds. And under my pillow, wrapped in a handkerchief, was a small pocket knife I'd found in my daddy's tool drawer. I never planned to use it, not really. But holding it made me feel like I still had some kind of say over what happened to me. I prayed constantly, desperate, pleading prayers whispered into the dark. I didn't ask for justice. I didn't even ask for it to stop. I asked God to take me in my sleep, to let me slip away quietly so I wouldn't have to wake up and pretend again. I thought maybe, if I died quietly enough, they'd bury me in that pretty pink dress I liked and sing "His Eye is on the Sparrow" at the funeral. I wanted peace, and back then, death seemed like the only version of it I might ever get. The older I got, the more skilled I became at performing normalcy. I went to youth group on Wednesdays, read scripture aloud without shaking, and even led the prayer circle once. I smiled in school pictures and nodded when grown folks asked how I was doing. Fine, I'd say, because it was easier than the truth. No one wants to hear that your soul feels like it's leaking out of you bit by bit. Uncle Harvey changed too. He grew bolder in some ways, crueler in others. His visits to my room were less frequent, but more calculated. He knew when to strike. On nights when Mama was out late at choir practice, when Daddy was working a double shift, when the house was still and there were no witnesses. He was always so careful, always just under the threshold of what might make someone look too closely. It was like he knew exactly how much pain to cause without leaving visible marks. By then, I didn't flinch anymore. I didn't cry. I went somewhere else inside myself, someplace cold and quiet. I told myself stories in my head, pretend lives where I lived in a city far away, worked in a library, maybe had a cat. I imagined I had a different name, a different body, a different family. I think Mama noticed sometimes, the way my eyes had dulled, the way I folded into myself. But she never asked, not once, and I didn't offer. There was no safety in speaking, not in our house, only more danger, so I stayed quiet. I got good grades, I made myself useful, and I waited, for what? I didn't know. Maybe for someone to finally see me, maybe for a sign, or maybe just for the strength to keep breathing one more day. It was a Wednesday when everything changed. I remember that because youth group had run late. We'd stayed behind to practice a skit for the Easter service. By the time I stepped off the church bus, the sky had already opened up. Rain came down in heavy sheets, drenching me before I'd even reached the porch. My shoes squished with each step, and my blouse clung to my skin. Mama wasn't home yet, which wasn't unusual on choir practice nights. Daddy's truck was gone too, but the lights were on, and I figured Uncle Harvey was inside. I moved fast, head down, hoping to slip through the house without being seen. I was 16, and by then I knew how to read the air in a room. And the moment I stepped inside, I felt it. Something off, something thick and sour. His voice called out from the kitchen, slurred and lazy. "That you, Lulu?" I didn't answer. I went straight to my room and shut the door, heart already hammering. I reached for the chair to wedge it under the knob like always, but I hesitated. My clothes were soaked, and my fingers fumbled with the wood. In that brief pause, I heard the floorboards creak behind me. Before I could lock the door, it swung open. Uncle Harvey stood there, glassy-eyed and unsteady. The smell of whiskey hit me first, sharp and bitter. "Ain't you gonna say hi to your uncle?" he asked, smiling like we were playing some stupid game. I stepped back, clutching my arms, but he stepped forward. I told him to leave, voice trembling, but he just laughed, said I was being dramatic. Then he reached for me. I fought him. For the first time, I didn't freeze. I pushed and kicked and screamed. My voice cracked with it, raw and loud, and something inside me broke free. That was when the door behind him flew open. My aunt stood there, her Sunday clothes soaked through, a plastic rain bonnet clinging to her head. She'd come early, a surprise visit. Maybe she'd forgotten something. Maybe she just wanted to see him. Whatever the reason, she stood frozen for half a second, taking in the scene. Me, half-dressed and shaking, and him, drunk and looming. And then she screamed. But not the scream I expected. Not a scream of outrage, or fear, or fury at him. No. She looked at me like I was dirt under her shoe. "You Jezebel!" she shouted, her voice shrill and rising. "What have you done to this man?" I stood there, stunned, still breathing hard, the air thick with whiskey and rain. I waited for someone to come running, for someone to ask if I was okay, but no one came. My aunt shoved past Harvey and grabbed my arm. "Put some clothes on," she snapped. "You ought to be ashamed." And just like that, it was over. The rescue I had imagined for years turned into another wound, a deeper one I'd carry for the rest of my life. There's a kind of pain that goes beyond the body, beyond bruises and scrapes, beyond even fear. It's the kind that hollows you out from the inside, leaves you hollow and echoing. That's what I felt as my aunt dragged me through the hallway, her grip iron tight on my arm. My feet slipped on the wet floor, but she didn't care. She didn't look at my face, didn't see the rawness in my eyes. All she saw was what she needed to see, a scandal to smother, a problem to erase. We passed Mama on the way to the front room. She was just stepping in, her church shoes squeaking on the floor, the hem of her robe damp from the rain. She froze when she saw us. I waited for something in her to ignite, motherly instinct, outrage, even confusion, but she just looked away, didn't ask what happened, didn't speak. She turned her back and started wiping her wet glasses on her sleeve, like that tiny task mattered more than whatever truth was bleeding out behind her. Daddy was in his chair, the one by the fireplace. He'd come home sometime after I did, must have seen the scene already unfolding. He didn't stand up. He didn't speak, just stared at the muted television screen, his jaw tight, his eyes empty. In that moment, I realized they'd all made a choice. Not one of them asked me what had happened. Not one of them asked if I was hurt or scared or needed help. They had already decided who I was and who he was. And the truth, my truth, wasn't invited into that decision. That night, they packed my suitcase for me. My aunt barked orders while Mama folded my clothes with trembling hands. Daddy stayed in his chair. Uncle Harvey was nowhere to be seen. No one told me where I was going until I was already in the car. "You're going up north to stay with Cousin Lila for a while," Mama said, eyes fixed on the road. "It's best this way. You've been acting too grown." Too grown. That's what they called it. Not traumatized, not victimized, just fast, as if the shame belonged to me and not the man who had stolen my childhood piece by piece. I didn't cry. I sat in the back seat and stared out the window, the lights of the town blurring past like streaks of paint. I wasn't sad. I wasn't angry. I was numb, hollowed out, like something in me had finally caved in under the weight of all those years. I never went back home after that night, never slept in that bed again, never saw my aunt or uncle again. Mama sent letters sometimes, short and polite. Daddy never did. I'd been erased, cut out like a bad paragraph in a family story nobody wanted to read aloud. The train ride north felt like a funeral, not the loud kind with choirs and flowers, but the quiet kind, the kind where everyone just stands around not knowing what to say. I sat by the window with my suitcase at my feet, watching the trees slip past like ghosts. I was 16, alone, and carrying the weight of a sin that wasn't mine. Mama had put a $20 bill in my pocket and pressed a peanut butter sandwich into my hand like that would fix anything. Be good, she'd said, not even meeting my eyes, as if that had been the problem all along. My goodness, or lack of it. Cousin Lila met me at the station, wearing her usual bright lipstick and an old wool coat. She was my mother's cousin, older, widowed, and stern in that way that made children sit up straight. But she wasn't cruel. She took one look at me and sighed, like she already knew not to ask questions. "Let's get you home," she said, and I followed her without a word. I didn't tell her why I was there. She didn't ask. That silence suited us both just fine. Her house was small and smelled like mothballs and lavender. She gave me the guest room and told me to be in by dark. I went to school, kept my head down, and did my chores without being told. I was polite, clean, and quiet. The kind of girl people left alone. And that was all I wanted, to be left alone. I didn't try to make friends, didn't join any clubs. I moved through those years like a ghost wearing someone else's skin. I don't remember much about those first months, except how tired I always felt. Bone deep tired, like no amount of sleep could ever reach the places in me that hurt. But Cousin Lila never asked for more than I could give. She made dinner every night, meatloaf, collard greens, cornbread, and sometimes left little notes by my plate. "Stay strong," she'd write, or "God sees you." I never responded, but I read every one. Eventually, I graduated, got a job at the library shelving books. It was quiet work, and I liked that. The silence didn't demand anything from me. I met my husband there, Thomas, a kind man who didn't ask about my past, just smiled with his whole face, and walked like he'd never been in a hurry. He made me feel safe, which was something I didn't know I needed until I had it. We married, had children, built a life filled with small joys and soft mornings. I laughed again, not right away, and not all the way, but enough. I learned to mother my children with a tenderness I'd never known. I listened when they spoke. I believed them. I made sure they knew there was nothing they could say that would make me stop loving them. Still, there was always a room inside me that stayed locked. A room where 16-year-old me still stood, suitcase in hand, waiting for someone to say, "I believe you." But no one ever did. So I kept that door closed. I told myself it didn't matter anymore. I had survived. I had made something good out of something awful. That should have been enough. And for a long time it was, until it wasn't. Time moved on, as it always does, with or without your consent. I raised 3 children in that quiet northern town. Each of them loved, each of them heard. I made birthday cakes from scratch, sewed Halloween costumes late into the night, and prayed over them when they were sick. I watched their chests rise and fall while they slept, and promised myself I would never let them feel what I had felt. I would be their shield, even if no one had ever been mine. Thomas was good to me, steady, thoughtful, gentle in a way that made space around him. He never pressed, never asked why I startled at night noises or grew quiet when certain songs came on the radio. He just held me when I trembled and let me talk when I was ready, though I never told him everything. Some things felt too old to speak out loud, like saying them would only bring them back to life. He didn't need to know the details to understand the silences. He loved the whole of me, even the parts I kept locked away. We grew old together, built a life rich in the kind of love that doesn't need to announce itself. Our children grew and scattered, building lives of their own, and we filled our days with crossword puzzles, slow walks, and the kind of laughter that doesn't hurt. I became a grandmother, and in their small hands and wide eyes, I saw something holy, something worth protecting. I held my grandbabies with a kind of reverence, whispering prayers into their hair that they would always be safe, that they would never know betrayal from the people meant to love them. Still, there were moments, flashes of the past that broke through without warning. A scent, a word, a dark hallway. I'd freeze, just for a second, as if time had rewound itself. And afterward, I'd feel ashamed. Ashamed that the memory still had power. Ashamed that after all these years, I was still carrying him inside me like a wound that hadn't scabbed over. I told myself I had moved on, that I had won by living well. But there was a difference between surviving and healing. And deep down, I knew I had only done the first. I never went back home, never saw that house again. Most of the people who lived there are gone now. Daddy passed in his sleep, Mama in the hospital, still clutching her Bible. My aunt lived the longest. After Uncle Harvey died, she kept mostly to herself. We exchanged Christmas cards for a few years, hollow things filled with small talk and nothingness. I didn't hate her. I just couldn't forget her face that night, the way she looked at me like I was the one who'd brought shame to her doorstep. For a long time, I thought that silence was strength, that burying the past was the same as overcoming it. But now, as my body softens with age and my days grow shorter, I've come to understand something different. You can't heal what you refuse to name. You can't set yourself free with your mouth closed. And no matter how good the life you build afterward, some part of you remains unfinished if the truth never gets spoken. It was almost a year ago now, maybe a little more, when my cousin called and asked if I'd come help sort through my late aunt's things. She'd passed quietly, in her sleep, just a few weeks after her 89th birthday. There wasn't much left, no property to divide, no dramatic reading of wills, just boxes and closets and drawers full of what a life accumulates when no one's looking. Scarves that still smelled faintly of perfume, shoes never worn, cookbooks with margin notes in neat, tidy script. I didn't want to go, not at first. I hadn't seen that cousin in decades, and the thought of being surrounded by my aunt's belongings made my stomach churn. But something pulled at me. Curiosity, maybe, or something older. I agreed, packed a small bag, and took the train down. Her apartment was small and sunlit, too clean to feel lived in. My cousin handed me a set of keys and said, "Take your time," before heading out to run errands. I stood there alone, surrounded by the ghosts of a woman who had once called me a Jezebel. Most of it was easy to go through. Linens, costume jewelry, church bulletins, old greeting cards rubber banded together, unopened boxes of hair dye. But in the corner of the bedroom, under the window, was a cedar chest I'd never seen before. It was heavy and scratched, with brass hinges and a stubborn lock that stuck before finally giving way. Inside were things from her younger years, things I hadn't expected her to keep. Wedding photos, yellowed and curling at the edges, a dried corsage, a pair of baby shoes, though she'd never had children. And there's, near the bottom, wrapped in a lace handkerchief, was a yellowed envelope with no stamp, no return address, just one name written in faded ink, my mother's. I stared at it for a long time, heart thudding. My hands trembled as I unfolded it, the paper thin and fragile like it might disintegrate. The words inside were in my aunt's handwriting, small, tight letters, pressed hard into the page. It was a confession, not dramatic, not apologetic, but unmistakably clear. She had known. She'd known what Harvey was. She had seen the bruises, had caught the way he looked at me. She had walked in on him more than once, not just that night, but others, earlier. And still, she had said nothing, because she was ashamed, because she didn't want the church to talk, because she couldn't stand the thought of her husband being that kind of man. So instead, she decided I was that kind of girl. She never mailed the letter. Maybe she thought about it. Maybe she wrote it late one night when the guilt kept her awake. But she didn't send it. She tucked it away in that chest, buried beneath fabric and photographs, as if hiding it could make it untrue. I sat there with that paper in my lap, the words swimming in front of me. 70 years. And here it was. Proof. Not just of what happened, but that I hadn't imagined it. That I hadn't been alone in the knowing. I read the letter 3 times before I folded it back into the envelope. Each time the words landed differently, sharper, deeper. There was no apology in it, no trembling remorse or request for forgiveness. Just the truth, laid out in careful sentences. She had known. She had chosen not to act. And now, decades later, long after it could have made any difference, she had written it down and hidden it in a box. I sat in that quiet apartment for a long while, the letter resting on my knees. The sunlight moved across the floor in slow lines, and outside, someone's wind chimes tinkled in the breeze. It was strange, the way everything felt so ordinary while my whole body was humming with something I couldn't name. Not rage, not grief, just knowing. And with knowing came something else, a kind of release. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't a liar. The thing I had buried so deep inside me that I could hardly bear to touch it, it had always been real. But even with the letter in hand, I didn't feel vindicated. There was no one left to hand it to, no courtroom or family circle where I could read it aloud and demand they believe me. Most of the people who could have made sense of it were gone. Mama was buried beneath a stone etched with scripture. Daddy had passed before my own children were grown. Uncle Harvey had died of liver failure decades earlier, long before the reckoning I once dreamed of. My aunt, too, was gone. Her body returned to dust, and her sins tucked into a cedar chest she must have known someone would open. I thought about burning the letter, letting the flames consume the proof just as time had already swallowed the people. I thought about mailing it to no one, or writing my own letter in response, if only to say, I survived you. But in the end, I did neither. I folded it carefully, placed it back inside the envelope, and slipped it into my purse. Not to hide it again, but to carry it, this time on my own terms. It's strange, the weight of truth, lighter than lies, yet somehow heavier in the heart. That letter didn't change what had happened, but it gave shape to my silence. It named the thing I had lived with, and for the first time I felt like I had something more than memory. I had evidence, not for the world, not for my children or grandchildren, for me. That night, back in my own bed, I lay awake thinking of that little girl, the one who waited for someone to believe her. I saw her face so clearly, not afraid anymore, just tired. I reached for her in my mind, took her hand, and whispered what I wished someone had said all those years ago. It wasn't your fault. I know what he did, and I believe you. I wept then, not out of sorrow, but out of recognition. For the first time I had spoken the truth, and the silence finally broke. After I found the letter, something shifted in me. It wasn't loud or dramatic, just a quiet, steady unraveling. I started saying his name again, not out loud to others, but in my prayers, in my thoughts. Uncle Harvey. For years, I had only referred to him in fragments. The man, him, that time. Naming him felt like reclaiming something he tried to erase, like turning on a light in a room that had been dark for too long. I didn't tell my children. I thought about it, but the words always stalled in my throat. Not because I was afraid they wouldn't believe me, but because I didn't want to hand them the weight I had carried. They'd made their lives with joy and safety. They looked at me and saw strength, calm, and steadiness. And I wanted to leave them with that, I didn't want their memories of me to become tangled with shadows they couldn't untangle. But I did begin to write, not for anyone else, just for me. Pages and pages, longhand, filling old notebooks with everything I remembered, every detail I had held back, every moment I had swallowed. I wrote down how it felt to sleep with a knife under my pillow, how Mama's slap burned more than his touch, how my aunt's eyes, full of judgment, had stayed with me longer than any bruise. It didn't heal me all at once, but it loosened the knot in my chest, gave shape to the fog that had followed me for so long. There's a power in truth, even when it's quiet, even when no one else hears it. I started speaking to God differently too, not just as someone begging for peace, but as someone ready to live in it. I no longer asked him why it happened. I stopped looking for lessons in the pain. Instead, I thanked him for keeping me, for giving me breath through the worst of it, for guiding me, even when I thought I was alone. I didn't need revenge. I didn't need anyone to fall to their knees and say they were sorry. What I needed was to speak, to name what happened, to hold it in the light, and that's what I did, not with fire or fury, but with clarity, calm, like water washing away something that had stained me for too long. It's not a dramatic kind of freedom. It doesn't come with trumpets or applause. It's subtle, soft, but it's mine. And it came the moment I said it, not in anger, not in fear, but in truth. He hurt me, and I survived. Not as the girl they tried to shame, not as the lie they wanted me to live, but as a woman who knew exactly what had been done to her and who chose finally to say so. I don't expect this story to make waves. It won't be in any newspaper. There will be no courtroom scene, no tearful reunion, no hand on my shoulder saying, "I'm sorry." That's not what this is. This is something quieter, something more sacred. It's the truth, spoken at last, not for validation, but for release. And in speaking it, I am not just freeing myself. I am reaching back for the little girl I used to be, and for every girl like her. Because this story is not only mine, it belongs to every child who was told to hush, to every daughter, niece, cousin who was taught that family came first, even when family hurt them. It belongs to every girl who was branded as fast for surviving the worst kind of betrayal. To every woman who carried her silence into marriage, into motherhood, into old age, and learned to live with it lodged like a splinter beneath the skin. For 70 years, I bore the weight of that silence. It shaped me, hardened some parts, softened others. I raised children with a tenderness born from absence. I loved my husband with a fierceness born from fear. I built a life on carefulness, on vigilance, on quiet strength. But now, at 82, I choose to do something different. I choose to speak not with bitterness, but with certainty. What happened to me should never have happened. And what was done to me after, the exile, the blame, the erasure, was its own kind of violence. I see that now. I name it. I hold it out into the light, not to shame the dead, but to honor the truth. To remind myself that my silence was not consent, that my survival was not a flaw, that my voice, though late, still matters. I don't know who, if anyone, will hear this. Maybe no one, or maybe someone somewhere who is carrying her own brick of silence will hear and feel a little less alone. Maybe she'll speak. Maybe she won't. But she'll know she's not the only one, and that matters. I will leave this world lighter than I entered it, not because what happened is gone, but because I finally stopped carrying it alone. I have spoken. I have named the darkness, and I have walked through it into the light. So to the little girl I was, and to every little girl still waiting to be believed, I say this: I see you. I believe you, and we are not alone anymore.